Welcome everybody to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Stephen Galloway, the Dean of Chapman University's Film School. And before I welcome our guests, I want to let you know that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a non-profit organization that relies entirely on donations to provide emergency assistance and free educational programs to SAG-AFTRA artists. This conversation is made possible thanks to the generosity of our supporters. Over the past year, the foundation's given over $6.5 million in COVID relief to more than 7,000 performers. If you're a SAG-AFTRA artist and need help, please ask. And if you can, please give. Information can be found in the description of this video. So thank you for your support. And now, without further ado, it's really my pleasure to introduce Matthew Rhys and John Lithgow of Perry Mason. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen. Great to be here.
Of performance, and I really want to center this subject on that. Let's start with you, Matthew. You're taking on an iconic role. How do you step into the footsteps of another actor? Do you watch what he did? Do you ignore it completely? Does it even play a role in your preparation?
The short answer is no. I stayed firmly away from the original Perry Mason. I know from my own problems in the past, when I have, or when I'm trying to create something and I watch something as reference, I do have this terrible kind of tick of, whether it's conscious or subconscious, of taking on an element of mimicking. And I knew that if I were to watch Mr. Burr in the originals, I knew somehow, somewhere it would come out in something I did. Whether I was aware or not. So that was my first thing. But also, you know, my memory of the original and what I read in the pilot episode was so wildly different. And there was, I was always trying to find where the cutoff is age-wise of those who have a very firm idea of who Perry Mason should be, and then the generations who go, "Who's Perry Mason?" Then I would go, "Great, that's those are the people I want to watch," so that you're not being held up for comparison.
Where is the cutoff?
I found around 40. It was just under 40 years of age. They would kind of go. Some had an idea of who Perry Mason was. Kind of around 30. They'll often say, "Who's Perry Mason?" But yeah, 40 and up, and then 60s and 70s, they're like, "Well, you're no Raymond Burr." You're like, you get that.
John, did you grow up with Perry Mason?
Well, it was very much in the background. I was not much of an episodic TV watcher when I was a kid. I certainly remember all the characters, and it's very much a black and white memory. The interesting thing about this whole project is that even Perry Mason back in the 60s and 50s, 60s, 70s, that was an update of Perry Mason. The original material was written back in the 1930s and set in Los Angeles. In its way, our version of it is more loyal to Earl Stanley Gardner than theirs was. Nobody knows that because you talk about the lines being blurred, Matthew, and age 40. Everybody who remembers that pulp fiction in the 30s is long, long gone. So to me, the field was open.
What you said you didn't watch much episodic TV. What did you watch, and what influenced you that you draw on as an actor now?
On television, well, I remember as a little boy when I was like 7 years old, my family was obsessed with Your Show of Shows on Sunday nights, which is still, to me, a great high watermark in American comedy. This was Sid Caesar and Imogen Coca and Howard Morris and Carl Reiner. It had a kind of crazy comedy energy, which always referred to when we did Third Rock from the Sun.
Right. Did you want to go into comedy when you thought of becoming an actor?
You know, my history is very curious. I grew up in a theater family, specifically Shakespeare of all things. My father produced Shakespeare festivals in Ohio. And as a kid, I was in lots and lots of plays, just as a a kid actor or a supernumerary, a soldier or a servant. And I grew up eventually playing parts. And they tended to be nutty Shakespearean little character parts like Froth and Nym and Peto and parts that nobody ever puts on their resume, but they were Shakespearean clowns and they were wild. You know, it was like everything you could do to draw attention away from Hamlet and Macbeth. So I had done plenty of theater comedy. It was just a big surprise to everybody when I did Third Rock from the Sun. It was like dusting it off after many, many years.
Matthew, what about you? What made you fall in love with acting?
There's a very strong tradition in Wales for performing arts. You know, there's an ancient, kind of pre-Christian festival called the Eisteddfod, which all Welsh children, I was going to say, are encouraged. You're kind of forced to do it, really, as a Welsh kid. It's a Welsh-speaking festival, happens twice a year, whereby poetry recitals, singing, any kind of performing arts is encouraged, and you compete. And so there's this, you know, that coupled with the oral tradition of storytelling in Wales, and then of course the chapel, Sunday chapel, you know, the reciting of the Bible from the pulpit, as you know, kids are invited up during Sunday sermon. So all those elements were kind of, you know, I felt, you know, performing from an early age, but then acting was always something you did as a hobby, as a pastime, as something to be revered, as all performing arts were, but ultimately not to do as a full-time career. So when I said to my parents, who were both teachers, you know, I'd like to give this a go, I think there was some mild concern, which they still have.
Matthew, can you remember like 15 seconds of Welsh drama that from your childhood?
Oh my goodness.
I've never asked you to do this, but there's no time like the present.
I'm trying to think. No, I can't think of anything.
Well, John, can you remember any of the Shakespeare from your childhood?
Down, down I come like glistering phaeton, wanting the manage of unruly jades. In the base court, where kings grow base, to come at traitors call and do them grace. In the base court, come down, down court, down king, for night owls shriek where mounting larks should sing.
Oh, that just
old
get you the Emmy Award, but it gets you your third Tony, so congratulations. How do you, when you do a TV series like this, how does your acting training, which is largely theatre oriented, shape you? How do you go about thinking of a character like this? Let's start with you, John. This is not a comic character. He's a bit in the tradition of the John Huston in Chinatown. What's your, if you research, how do you prepare?
Well, in this case, you just sort of fling yourself into it. Whenever you're doing work on camera, you tend to do a lot less rehearsing. You're lucky if you have a half-hour conversation with the director and the writers, which is about what I had. But you spend a lot of time with makeup and hair and wardrobe, making all sorts of minute decisions. And in this case, fantastic collaborators, Emma Potter, the costumer, principally. And you just put it together piece by piece. At the heart of it all is the writing, and Rollin Jones and Ron Fitzgerald just created this fantastic arc of an extremely original character, not a character from the familiar series, nor even from the early Pulp Fiction. The name of the character, E.B. Jonathan, is absolutely the only thing they picked out of Earl Stanley Gardner. It was somebody named E.B. Jonathan, and they loved that name. Then they went and they invented something that fits right into that world, and something that was a tremendous tool for creating the origin story of Perry Mason, a mentor whom he begins to perceive doesn't know what he's doing, and he has to take over and replace him. I just appreciated the ingenuity of their writing. And of course, he comes to a sad end. It was all a process of almost intellectually figuring out where exactly do you give little hints as to what's coming without letting anyone know what's coming.
How do you do that? Do you map it out on your script and write down at different points, at this point I need to convey so-and-so?
I don't think I wrote down a single thing ever. It's just, you think about it. Tim Van Patten, our wonderful director for the first 2 episodes, I don't know, it's just, I just remember figuring out for myself, where do I betray a little bit of insecurity? Where do I betray a little bit of panic? And I don't remember ever saying, Tim, what do you think? He's not that kind of director. He trusts his actors so explicitly. So mainly it was kind of a game of surprising people, turning the crew into my audience. It either works or doesn't. You move on to another take, and if it's way off, and occasionally was, Tim just would come forward and say, why don't you try this? Usually had to do with taking it down a bit. That's where the theater is the cross I bear.
Oh, that's interesting. I just want to go back to one thing you said before asking Matthew the same question, which is, you talk about the minute tinkering you did with the look, costumes. Can you give us an example?
Well, as John referenced, we were incredibly lucky with that, hair, makeup, and costume department. But Emma Potter especially, I felt, as I'm sure John did, the creation of Perry was literally from the boots up with her, cheek by jowl, figuring it out, who he was, why he wore what he did, when he did. And also there was some strong indications from obviously the period we're in, because the Depression clothes meant something very different to people. And also, as Ron and Roland put in the script, Perry was someone who was buying clothes off dead corpses from a morgue. So they were peppering the script with some very kind of provocative ideas of how he would dress. And then that creation really informed me as to kind of the direction in which he was going to go. And also, that he was this farm boy living in this kind of Dickensian Great Expectations farmhouse with a rotting cake somewhere that had been abandoned, but he was trapped by it. So all those elements that the incredible John Goldsmith and his design kind of infused as well, all lent themselves. And the one thing I did research, I'm not usually that big on research, because I find it hard that it informs the performance, but I did research veterans of the First World War, and what it was they were bringing back with them, post World War One, and there were small elements that I kind of tried to infuse in that.
And what did you find that they did bring back? What surprised you in that research?
I remember reading one line that was saying there was a heaviness to them, and I remember really thinking that would lend itself to Mason, who kind of has a heaviness, not just because of the war, because many other elements. And to that degree, when we tried on the leather jacket, the kind of hero leather jacket, it was, we tried on this leather jacket, it was sound too big and a little heavy, and I thought it would work well in the heat of California, kind of brought Mason's shoulders down a bit. And there would be somewhere then to go in those, as he kind of evolves as a lawyer, and the kind of broadening of his suits, as it were, as he finds himself. But that arc as an actor is incredibly fortuitous, because I was literally doing the same arc Perry was doing on screen in real time. I was learning how to be a courtroom lawyer in real time, which was an incredible luxury.
That darkness, how do you reach that psychologically? The old tried and tested way. There's sort of a sense memory if it's required. I mean, that's the short answer. You basically think of something in your own life that reflects that's going on in the scene.
So much of it comes from the people you're acting with. I find my favorite scene in the whole 4 episodes that I did was with Matthew. By the time we shot it, this was in the 4th episode, we'd done a lot together, and a certain relationship had evolved between these two characters, as it had between Matthew and me, just working together and trusting each other, I think. And it was the scene where EB is genuinely lost. He's sleeping in the office. He's drunk and hungover and absolutely desperate. And Perry comes upon him. And it's the scene in which you find out Perry has known him since he was a boy, knew his father, knew his whole history. And there's an enormous poignancy on both sides. You see EB, this ruined man, but you also see that Perry is a man who's been terribly damaged since he was a child. And there was a little moment where I can't even get my shoes off. So Perry helps crouches down, gets on his knees and takes my shoes off. And I just reached out and ran my fingers through his hair like he was a little tow-headed boy. And that just came out of absolutely nowhere. And it came out of Matthew as much as out of me. Don't you think that's true, Matthew? And it's so true of this company of actors. You could trust absolutely everybody they hired, a miraculous bunch of people.
I completely agree. I think, that was one of, I think it's something that Tim does, not just with cast, but crew. He trusts those, those people with the positions in which they're given, and never so much more than this company of actors, that there was such, as John says, such trust between us. And then from that trust, you can play. It's the great sounding board then to kind of, the springboard to kind of real play. And, if you trust someone, you're willing to be vulnerable, and certainly, very much so in that scene.
And it's a lucky chance for an actor to be at a great ensemble. Matthew and I are doing a SAG-AFTRA interview because we're nominated for Emmys. But as I was sitting waiting for us all to start, I decided to just write down all the actors that deserved an Emmy as much as we did. And because this is a SAG-AFTRA interview, I'm just going to say them out loud. Chris Chalk, Juliet Rylance, Jefferson Mays, Gail Rankin, Tatiana Maslany, Veronica Falcon, Lily Taylor, Eric Lang, Andrew Howard, Stephen Root, Nate Cordry, and Shea Wiggum. I just wanted to say their names.
That's nice of you.
It's an incredible luxury to be in a bunch of people like this. We all want to get a lot of attention and shine, but it's great when you're acting with people who are even better than you are. And that's how it felt.
Let's talk about what happens in the opposite situation, when you're acting with somebody who's actually not very good. I'm sure that's happened. How does that affect
Never.
How does that affect your performance, John? And
this is a question we don't answer.
We never go near this one.
How do you then get over that? You're a professional. How do you make it work when you're not getting that?
I remember I had an acting teacher say to me once, because the question was kind of raised in this when we were all in our late teens at drama college, and someone asked the acting teacher that, and she said, that's very simple. No one, you don't look at them and think they're acting badly. You look at them as if they are that character, and what it is that's making them behave that way. She goes, you still react to them as that character. You never react to an actor as an actor. You only react to a character as a character. There's no such thing as bad acting. You're just reacting to a way a character is interacting with you. And that should then inform your performance.
Great answer.
And the other thing you have to always remember is bad actors can give great performances and great actors can give bad performances. Everything is context. Besides which, the bottom line is you save your ass. I mean, the worst thing is working for bad directors in bad writing. Mm. And if you're working with bad actors too, that's the hat trick. You simply have to save your
yes. And you hope life is terrible. That doesn't help.
No, yeah. But it's true what John says about working with a bad director, or if a director makes you, if a director makes you feel vulnerable or not safe, then in that to me is one of the worst working scenarios, where if someone feels intimidated or bullied or vulnerable or insecure, it's the worst atmosphere for anyone to try and create anything.
George C. Scott had a great quote which summed it all up. He said, "All actors are in trouble. and directors who don't help are a pain in the ass.
He was
George C. Scott saying.
George C. Scott was notoriously difficult.
Yeah, I know.
And occasionally inebriated. So have you ever walked away from a role or a production because you just felt you couldn't give it what it merited? Matthew?
Yes, I have. And it's one of my great life regrets.
Oh.
At the age of 24, I was offered the part of Hamlet. And I honestly thought I was too young to play the part. And I went, I don't have enough life experience to play Hamlet. It terrified me as a part. I went, I want another 6 years before I could attempt Hamlet. And then I've never been offered it since.
Oh, no.
It has haunted me my entire life.
But did you finally play it that second time?
No, I've never been offered it.
You know, I turned down Hamlet 3 times myself.
What?
Aren't we stupid? I mean, why did we do this? I don't know.
So you've never played him, John?
I've never played Hamlet, no.
Oh, good grief.
There's an awful lot of Shakespeare I've never done, mainly because I did so much of it before I was 20 years old.
Is one role you would eat both long to play one day?
You can imagine how many times I've been asked that question. And I always answered, well, eventually King Lear.
Yeah.
I played King Lear. So I have no answers for that anymore. I just rely on other people's brainstorms.
Good. Let's brainstorm. Look, Sir Ian McKellen is about to play Hamlet. There's no reason why you can't, Mr. Lithgow.
I've heard that. I heard that Ian is going to be a superannuated Hamlet. Or you just have to read those speeches and think, wow, I could do this.
I know. It's like
you could still do it. And I could play Claudius, you know.
Done.
You do Hamlet, I'll do Claudius.
I would pay to see that.
Or better, Polonius. I would be the Polonius.
Has there ever been a moment in your career where you thought, I'm not so
yes.
getting it?
I think there are moments when you think, well, mainly you think, why did I ever take this job and what am I doing with my life? You know, you're not bored with acting. You're just waiting for something better. And there's nothing worse than having no job at all.
What about you, Matthew?
No, the short answer is you're never bored of acting, as John says, I think, because there's so much to mine. There's never a part I've looked back and went, oh, I nailed that, you know, and as soon as I did, you continually mine and improve or, strive to improve. Yes, there are certain parts that you kind of go, oh, I'll be ready to play something possibly different or a little more challenging, as much as that might contradict itself. There are moments you find yourself in some outlandish costume feeling more humiliated, that you go, why am I doing this? This is no way for a grown man to make a living. But never bored of acting, because it's so rich and so often unobtainable. What
do you do when you're not acting, when you're not working? Do you read? Do you garden?
I do enjoy horse riding. That's when there's time, time away from the children allows. But I recently restored. I took a few years restoring an old wooden boat.
Oh wow!
In New York, yeah. So I've been spending my days on that, sanding and varnishing.
Oh. John, that's a hard one to top. That's really interesting.
Oh no! Let me just interject, because I know that John Lithgow is the ultimate Renaissance man or Renaissance man. There's no end to what this man does or continues to do.
Yeah. Well, it's all born. Thank you, Matthew. But it's all born of fear that nobody will want me as an actor. I've always, first of all, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an artist. In fact, I actively did not want to be an actor. It was the family business, and I didn't want to do it. But got to college and I was the campus star, just because by osmosis I had learned how to act better than anybody else. So I went with the flow when I abandoned art. But I go back to it all the time. In fact, I just finished my 3rd book of satirical poems I've illustrated myself. This was all something that happened at age 72. It's been the last 3 years. That's one thing. I also wrote children's books and entertained children in orchestra concerts. I sort of just grasp at interesting creative activities for fear of nobody wanting me. And it's opened up all sorts of really fascinating things. What I always tell young people is find something in your life that you'd rather do than act, something creative. Give yourself a project, learn how to do something you didn't know you could do. And that project, in all likelihood, you'll never be able to accomplish it. And the reason is somebody will hire you to act. But it keeps your creative juices going. And I swear, I've just followed that little maxim my whole life and ended up doing the most unusual things. On February 22nd, I will be reviving a role that I created, dancing with the New York City Ballet. Now, find another actor who can say
What?
Yeah,
Tell us
yeah.
everything.
Be there, Matthew. Bring your children.
100%. What's the role?
The role is the elephant in Carnival of the Animals. But by God, I dance in a company of 50 dancers. I look like Dame Edna. I'm in drag and big fat suit. You cannot miss this.
I can't imagine a better way to end this than
I will recite the little stanza that introduces me. Mabel Bunce, the school nurse, lumbered into the hall, the scourge of each virus and germ. Though Nurse Bunce was decidedly wider than tall, her size didn't hamper her movements at all when she daintily waltzed at the elephant ball, a flirtatious and pert pachyderm.
Amazing. How many performances?
I think I do 3 performances over the weekend.
Oh my goodness.
Well, I can't imagine a better way to end this conversation than with the image of you as the pachyderm in contrast to what you achieved in Perry Mason.
I find them very similar, actually.
Oh, that's another conversation. I'm afraid we have to wrap. I want to thank both of you, Matthew Rhys, John Lithgow. Again, congratulations on really just wonderful work.
Thank you.
And on your nominations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephen. You made this very fun and easy.